Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. Minister, I've had the opportunity to look through the bill, and I suppose, like a lot of previous speakers, I would say that many aspects of the bill are quite confused and confusing, it seems to me, and perhaps ill thought out. The long title of the bill, I suppose, demonstrates to some extent the purpose of the bill, and it's an act to amend the law relating to the prohibition of incitement to violence or hatred against a person or group of persons on account of certain characteristics, and to provide for the offence of condoning, denying or grossly trivialising genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity and crimes against peace, and in so doing to give effect to the framework decision 2008 913 JHA. Now, if you look to that, there are several significant, there are differences and there are significant differences between the framework directive and the bill as drafted. Starting, I suppose, with the offences concerning racism and xenophobia, and that's the exclusive focus of the framework directive, which is proposed to implement, and it defines publicly inciting to violence or hatred directed against a group of persons or member of such a group defined by reference to race, colour, religion, descent, or national or ethnic origin. Whereas when you turn to the bill, this bill goes a lot further. Of course, it includes race, colour, religion, national or ethnic origin, and like the framework directive also includes descent to cover people who are descended from persons who are identifiable on that basis, but where that may no longer be present. But then the bill goes on to include gender, sex characteristics, sexual orientation and disability. And I suppose I have a particular question with regard to the protected characteristics. I don't fully understand what sex characteristics refer to. Obviously, gender is clearly defined, and it means the gender of a person or a gender which a person expresses as the person's preferred gender or with which the person identifies, and includes transgender and a gender other than those of male or female. Sexual orientation is defined by reference to the Equal Status Act. Disability is equally defined by reference to the Equal Status Act. But sex characteristics, references to sex characteristics shall be construed as references to the physical and biologic features of a person relating to sex. And I suppose I'm slightly confused by what that is intended to cover, particularly in the context of this bill. It is also, I suppose, noteworthy that the bill goes far beyond the purpose of the stated intention of the framework directive in dealing with gender and sexual orientation. But I suppose what I have most concern about is the whole idea of motivation. And the framework directive requires that member states shall take the necessary measures to ensure that racist and xenophobic motivation is considered an aggravating circumstance, or alternatively that such motivation may be taken into consideration by the courts in the determination of penalties. And I suppose that brings us to the crux of the bill and the definition of aggravating circumstances, which there's an article by Limerick University academics in the Irish Times today, which I don't need to go into because many previous contributors have already referred to it, because it's not just motivation that's an aggravating factor, but it's also when it's sort of accompanied by, and I suppose that is problematic to an extent, because I don't, I understand the reason that you've chosen to go down this road because of the difficulty of proving motivation. But there are downsides to that, as those academics have pointed out, and indeed previous contributors have pointed out. But then when we go back to other elements of the bill, such as incitement, 7 and 8, offence of incitement to violence or hatred against persons, well, you still have to prove intent. So I don't really see, how that difficulty isn't surmounted with regard to the offence of incitement to hatred, because and is the definition of the bill, or the definition of the offence requires that the person communicates material to the public that is likely to incite violence or hatred against a person, and does so with intent to incite violence or hatred. Likewise, the offence of possessing material, it means the person is required to be guilty of an offence. A person must possess or prepare or possess material that is likely to incite violence or hatred against a person, and prepares or possesses such material with intent to incite violence or hatred. So that is, I suppose, the crux of it. I mean, if you're required to prove intention with regard to the incitement of violence or hatred, that same requirement to prove intention is an element of the offence for the purpose of possessing material, well, I'm not entirely convinced by what is achieved in defining it as an aggravating circumstance, given the downsides as have previously been pointed out. So I suppose I'd look forward to the Minister elaborating on that, including this definition of sex characteristics, what exactly it is hoped to capture by that, and how it is hoped to improve upon the framework directive by specifically including sex characteristics. So those are my concerns. I look forward to having them addressed, Minister. Thanks.